we are about to witness yet another interview that we have right now. And speaking on the issue of NATO and whether NATO is really prepared for the summit held that is only 30 kilometers from Belarus border. And we are right now...
Major security challenge.
Precisely, precisely. So now we are joined with one of our experts right now as we speak. And hopefully right now we can speak about the subject with Mr. Tabach. Hello and welcome.
Hello, once again, I hope you can hear me. Hello. Yes.
Yes, I can.
Perfect.
Okay, fantastic. Following some initial technical glitches, we're ready to go. Yuri Tabach, former chief of staff at the NATO military liaison mission. Now, can you tell us, what are your personal expectations concerning the overall state of security? I mean, the general task of making sure that this summit is conducted safely in the close vicinity of the Belarusian border certainly did require certain major efforts to be made, right?
Well, I can only tell you from my personal experience. I was part of the NATO summit in 2008 in Bucharest, and I was actually part of the security detail there. And I don't want to go into details of how it is created, but it is extremely safe. There's nothing that can get through to the people because all of the heads of NATO are there. So the security is extremely high, very high.
Right, and looking at this, I believe that there's also quite a big question lying somewhere around those lines. Having in mind also the preparedness of all the Baltic states and then again also the preparedness of Lithuania. But is really NATO prepared to defend the summit that's really held only 30 kilometers from Belarus border? What do you think?
Well, you know, it's the 21st century, 30 kilometers or 300 kilometers, and today technologies, and especially military missile technologies, does not make much difference. And the anti-terrorist or terrorist attacks, anti-terrorist precautions that are taken are very, very high. It is one of the most secured meetings or summits that are being held in the world throughout the entire history. So from my past experience, I can tell you this is not something that we should worry about. What we as a civilized world should be worried about is not the safety of some bureaucrats and some officials. What we should worry about is why the sky over Ukraine is not closed. Why every day children are being killed here from the Russian missiles and from Russian terrorist attacks and the disasters they're causing here in Ukraine. I'm not worried about the safety of the heads of NATO and their entourages.
Now, as we speak, yes, as we speak, we can see the vehicles carrying President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, heading towards the NATO summit. Now, for the time being, we were talking about the military security in this strict kinetic sense, so to say. But I'm quite sure that there is also a major effort ongoing, and the details of which we should probably not be disclosing, concerning cybersecurity, because hybrid warfare generally has been one of the preferred methods for Russia during the last couple of years. Now, do you believe that Russia might be trying to deploy some of these methods, perhaps trying to discredit the summit itself? Have you been seeing any sort of signals that Russia has increased its activity in this regard during the last couple of days?
Well, I'm not privy to such information because, you know, I'm not an official, and I only speak from knowledge or from what I've learned from you, from the reporters. But I can tell you, as somebody whose entire career was dedicated to dealing with terrorism and terrorists, that we're dealing with a terrorist state. And the terrorist state, we should expect everything from them that terrorists usually do. And creating environmental disasters, as they have done in Ukraine, creating death of civilians that they have created in Ukraine, cyber attacks that they have conducted on practically all of the NATO countries and neighboring countries. We're dealing with the terrorists, and we should be prepared and we should be ready to deal with it, with such terrorists. So hopefully we are. and I'm sure we are.
Now, I'm glad that you mentioned this because when speaking about Russia using terrorist tactics, now this obviously also includes blackmail. There was a piece of information making the rounds during the last couple of hours involving former Russian leader Dmitry Medvedev. Now, he has published one of his usual rants, and that one was allegedly in response to some sort of alleged Ukrainian attack in the vicinity of a Russian nuclear power plant. Now, this wasn't really widely discussed in the media at all, but he was trying to say that, well, if this proves to be true, then Russia should be prepared to attack Ukrainian power plants and also power plants on the eastern flank. I mean, this clearly seems like the normal intimidation tactic. And this is probably no coincidence that these comments were made by Medvedev ahead of the NATO summit. What is your take on this?
I think what you insinuate or what you intend to say is that he's talking about Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is not Russian, which is a Ukrainian nuclear power plant, but it is now under occupation of the Russian forces. And there has been detection that they're mining it or they may cause another environmental disaster. And again, it's a terrorist tactics because we did not respond strongly as a world community to blowing up a dam prior to it causing an environmental disaster, and blowing up dams is a violation of Geneva Convention and crime against humanity. The terrorists usually escalate and go to the next level, which probably would be a nuclear plant in this case. And this is what I think you trying to say, is that this is former president of Russia, Medvedev, is talking about. He's threatening that if this plant, nuclear plant, blows up, that will be done by the Ukrainians, not by the Russians. Nevertheless, it is in possession of Russians. It is occupied by the Russian forces. So all of the responsibility lies in their hands. But in my personal opinion, if I can share it with you, Dmitry Medvedev is probably has been invading Finland too many times. I'm talking about Finland, the vodka. Finland.
All right. Shouldn't be perhaps advertising any particular brands, but yes, there are suggestions that Mr. Medvedev has been trying to fortify his constitution, so to say, using methods that you've just mentioned, especially in the light of Russia's failures on the front lines recently.
That's right, but also having in mind our main topic of our conversation, which is the security that is being held in the summit in Vilnius. Now, we know that Lithuania has tripled the deployment of border guards at the Belarus and also Russian borders, and increased police presence also in Vilnius itself to prepare for potential provocations that might actually erupt. And we do have right now a saying from Rustanas Lubievias, the commander of the State Border Guard. So let's hear him first before we dig deeper in the subject.
We still don't have substantial information on the presence of Wagner group in Belarus. However, Lithuania has introduced a number of security measures before the summit. And I have to say that the security level at the border as well as within the country was on a very high level. We haven't introduced any specific measures after we received information about possible Wagner presence in Belarus.
As we heard just now, it says that it's possible that Wagner troops are still being in Belarus. And now, do you think that perhaps Lithuania is being too cautious when implementing those triple measures, or rather they are perhaps should be more cautious or not cautious enough?
No, I believe that what the good general was saying at the border, that you have to take precautions. And nobody knows better than the former Soviet republics or former Soviet satellites such as Poland, the danger that we're dealing with. Russia, and particularly the KGB, who is running Russia now, are very, very dangerous people. They're dangerous from their origin. So all these precautions need to be taken. You should not be arrogant or ignorant of things that could be expected from the terrorists, because they'll go to any extent, like children and women and civilians, do not mean anything to them. And as I was seeing this segment, I was watching all this barbed wire and all this Constantine wire and all these precautions on the borders, trying to separate ourselves from Russia. And ourselves, I mean all of us, all of the civilized world, trying to separate from Russia. Really, that Constantine wire is not going to, I mean, it's going to help to prevent from some terrorist attacks, but it's not going to prevent us from the entire danger of Russia itself. We need to deal with Russia in itself as a community, as a world community, as a civilized world. And we must stop the killing of the Ukrainian people. At least we can do, if we're not willing to provide lethal weapons, the offensive weapons to Ukraine, at least we can do is close the skies over Ukraine and stop the killing that is going on for almost a year and a half of innocent people. Close the skies. And we can do it in a civilized world. So I hope this is going to be brought to a much acute or astute attention at the NATO summit.
Now, I'm quite sure that this sentiment is shared by many Ukrainians, including President Volodymyr Zelensky. Now, we're expecting his arrival in Vilnius any time now. But ahead of arriving at the NATO summit, he has made some comments. Now, these comments were published online, and some people have already basically discerned a certain sense of bitterness in what he's saying. Let me quote. He says that Ukraine deserves respect. Now, on the way to Vilnius, we received signals that certain wording is being discussed without Ukraine. And later on, he also says it is, or it seems there is no readiness either to invite Ukraine to NATO, nor to make it a member of the alliance. This means that a window of opportunity is being left to bargain Ukraine's membership in NATO in negotiations with Russia. And for Russia, this means motivation to continue its terror. Uncertainty is weakness, and it will openly, and I will openly discuss this issue at the summit. So do you think that right now we will be seeing a show of unity, or more of the uncertainty that Ukrainians are so concerned about?
Well, I mean, we're dealing with a huge bureaucracy. We need to be honest, and each country has its own interests in it, and it not necessarily coincides with the interests of Ukraine. I'm only speaking from the human point of view, that we as humans should not allow killing of other humans in such a way. But I mean, I fully agree with President Zelensky. I mean, I would be bitter because NATO made a huge mistake and Putin encouraged the KGB saga in 2008 by not inviting Ukraine into NATO. And before the war, again, not inviting Ukraine into NATO in 2014, coming up with kind of lame excuses such as corruption. I mean, come on. Which country doesn't have a corruption? Maybe Romania or Bulgaria or Albania are not corrupt countries. And what is corruption? I mean, we're all somewhat, I mean, we can see what's going on in my country, in the United States, with the corruption issues, right? So it's not in the chapter of NATO that the country should be corruption-free in order to be accepted. So, of course, he is bitter in a sense because his people are dying. His people are leaving the country. His nation is being destroyed. And for a year and a half, NATO has done, in a sense, absolutely nothing. Promised a lot, but nothing. I watched your previous program where it says, where Mr. Sullivan came out and said that President Biden is fully in support providing F-16s to Ukraine. What does that mean? Nobody clarifies. What does it mean he's in support, he's in agreement? Does it mean that we, the United States, are going to give F-16s? Then which budget, what Ленд Лиза we're going to do it with? Or maybe Poland is going to hand over and he's not he has no objection to it if Poland or other country gives F-16s to Ukraine, but then what's Poland or any other country is going to replace F-16s with? These very complicated issues. And this is just a political rhetoric saying, oh yeah, we're in support. We support Ukraine getting F-16s. That's not enough. Who's going to give it to them? How?
Absolutely.
When?
And honestly, looking at this, it seems that if there is any place or time to discuss this issue and resolve these complexities, it's definitely the NATO summit in Vilnius. And hopefully, in the nearest future, today or tomorrow, we will see a breakthrough with our own very eyes. Thank you so much for joining us today, Yuri Tabach. Right now was our guest today. Thank you so much.
And I hope President Zelensky is going to be firm with our allies to start moving on and start dealing with the issue instead of just promises and promises and promises. Thank you.
Very much so. Thank you.